Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Fix a Leak Week virtual workshop. This is the second part of a two-part program, and today we will be covering outdoor irrigation leak repair. This workshop series is brought to you by the City of Dallas, Fort Worth Water, Houston Public Works, the City of Round Rock, and Tarrant Regional Water District. By partnering together, we hope to bring you a high-quality training event. My name is Ryan Perlman, and I am a community liaison for Houston Public Works, Houston Water. This workshop is being held as a part of the annual Environmental Protection Agency WaterSense campaign, Fix a Leak Week. The campaign's vision is for all U.S. citizens to understand the importance of water efficiency and take positive actions to reduce their water use. Water is a finite resource. 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, but less than 1% is suitable for human consumption. Therefore, water purification facilities are integral to providing safe drinking water to all. Water managers and municipalities in at least 40 states expect local, statewide, or regional water shortages to occur over the next several years. Our aim for tonight's program is to prevent water loss due to leaks in the outdoor irrigation system. This in turn will allow us to conserve and prevent the precious treated water from our purification plants from being wasted. To those of you who joined us for the first workshop covering indoor leaks this past Tuesday, welcome back. Also, this program is being recorded and it will be available later to revisit. Tonight we have demonstrations of various types of outdoor irrigation leak repairs, followed by a question and answer session with our in-house experienced irrigation expert. If you have any questions, you can type them into the chat and we will have your questions answered by the expert. Before we begin, I want to start with a disclaimer. Houston Public Works, City of Dallas, Fort Worth Water, the City of Round Rock, and Tarrant Regional Water District, and any of our partners and sponsors do not assume any liability resulting from any attempted home repairs based on this training. Please do your own research, and if in doubt, call a licensed, certified irrigation professional. Additionally, at the end of the night, there will be a brief survey about this event. By completing the survey, you'll be eligible to win a water conservation prize. So make sure to stick around to the end. To kick off tonight's event, we have Jessica Woods from the City of Round Rock to tell us a little bit about the Texas section of the American Water Works Association. Jessica has been the Water Conservation Program Coordinator for the City of Round Rock since 2009. She is a TCEQ licensed irrigator, a master naturalist, and a TWWA Conservation and Reuse Division Chair. She also enjoys spending time outdoors, hiking with her dogs and attempting to garden, and lounging around a body of water with a good book and a cold drink. So, she has a presentation for us, and she's going to be covering a little bit about TAWWA. Let's roll the presentation.
Hi there, and thank you for joining us for part 2 of the Fix a Leak virtual workshop series. My name is Jessica Woods. I'm the Water Conservation Coordinator for the City of Round Rock, Texas. I'm also the Water Conservation Reuse Chairperson for the Texas section of the American Water Works Association, often called AWWA for short, which is a tongue twister. So what is the AWWA? It's a national organization designed to provide water treatment standards, distribution standards, education for utility workers, for utility staff. And the mission statement of the Texas section AWWA is a better Texas through safe and sustainable water. Our mission statement is providing solutions to protect public health, the environment, and effectively manage water, Texas's most vital resource. I mean, think about it. Without water, none of us would be here. There would be no life anywhere on the planet. So the Texas section, AWWA's Conservation and Reuse Division, is responsible for conservation education and best practices for utilities to help its customers, which is you, which is me, which is anyone who gets their water from a water utility, and the general public, which is really all of us, learn how to conserve water. And one way is events just like what we're attending right here today, where we're learning how to find and fix leaks. So I'm hoping that you are interested in your water usage and you understand the value of water and we don't want to waste it. And that's why you're here today. So one thing I challenge you to do is this weekend, brave the cold and go outside and locate your water meter. I think one of the best things you can do to protect yourself and to know how much water you're using at your property is know the location of your water meter. So go outside. It's going to be in your yard somewhere. It's not going to be attached to your house. It's not going to be in your garage. It's really not going to be up close to your house. It's going to be out in the yard, flush with the ground. It's not one of those big electric utility boxes. And the problem is I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like because the lid varies by water utility, by town. It could be a round metal lid, it could be a round plastic lid, it could be a rectangle, it could be a square. Plastic lids are the most common nowadays. Older areas do have metal lids still. But find that thing. It might say water, the words water meter right on top of the box lid. So that's a clue, right, for you. Locate it and then clean it off. Rip off all the grass that's on the top of it. Uncover the mulch. Trim back those shrubs that are surrounding it. Make it a nice, clean, easy place to locate in a case that you actually do have a water emergency to your house and you do need to go shut off that water, or the city needs to come and shut the water off for you. You want them to be able to find it quickly so that way you're not getting water damage at your house, that way you're not wasting water, have a high water bill. That way they can find it and fix it, all right? So take some time this weekend or just very soon and get out there and locate your water meter. You're gonna be happy you did if you ever need it. Okay, so that's enough from me. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here tonight. I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan so you can start learning about tonight's topic of outdoor water leaks and how to address them. Thank you again so much for coming.
All right. Thank you for the presentation, Jessica. I'll definitely be cleaning up my water meter at my home this weekend. I'm sure it could use a little TLC, so that's a great message from Jessica. Make sure you're able to locate your water meter and take a look at it. Sometimes it could be submerged, it could be mud in it. You want to make sure that it's cleaned out and ready to be accessed if necessary. So thank you again, Jessica, for being a part of this. All right, up next, we have an informative presentation featuring Patrick Dickinson from Rooted In. It's all about irrigation parts and components. First, a little bit about Patrick. He holds over 20 years of experience in landscape design and management, working both at Texas government agencies and private companies. With an eye for design and a keen knowledge of plants, Dickinson designs creative outdoor living spaces that are not only beautiful, but easy to maintain with maximum water efficiency. His areas of expertise include plant selection, landscape water use efficiency, rainwater harvesting, irrigation design, drip irrigation, and new technology. He often shares his wide range of knowledge by conducting continuing education training for landscape architects, licensed irrigators, as well as nurserymen and rainwater harvesting specialists. Dickinson received his bachelor's degree in horticulture with an emphasis in business and design from Tarleton State University. He is a TCEQ licensed irrigator, rainwater harvesting specialist, and board member of the Dallas Irrigation Association. Thank you for being here, Patrick.
Thank you for having me. We're very excited to be sharing the information and the videos tonight. They were definitely a labor of passion.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks again. All right. So this video demonstration is going to cover a lot. It's going to be a few pieces to it, and don't worry though, this recording will be available after the event. And our irrigation expert, Patrick, will be here to answer any questions that you might have. So let's start the presentation.
Well, we're out here doing an irrigation check on an irrigation system. We found a broken sprinkler head, so I'm going to flag it as a reminder to get it fixed. So keep some of these irrigation flags on hand. You can get them at most hardware stores. So I'm going to put that as a reminder. And now let's head over here to this table, and we're going to talk about some irrigation parts to help you out with some of the terminology and all the different components of your irrigation system. So we've got this nice little table set up with many of the different parts and components. But let's start back at where your irrigation starts. From your city meter, typically out at the curb or at the parkway of your house, is a separate box, and it's usually a rectangle box, and cleverly it says irrigation valve on it, and that's what's called your backflow or double check. That's where the water comes into your irrigation system. Your whole irrigation system is operated by water pressure. So when sprinkler heads pop up, when water comes out of your drip, it's all water pressure. The electricity is really from the controller and then to the solenoid of your valves, and that's where it stops. So there's no other electricity involved with this. So when we get from the city meter, the water comes in what's called your main line. So if we look at one of your irrigation meters, so one of the things you have to look for in your irrigation system is typically boxes that look like this. They have the round lid on them. It says irrigation control valve on it. You should have one of these that has a valve like this on the inside for every zone that you have on your sprinkler system. So this is a larger 1-inch valve, just showing you for demonstration. Most of your valves will be anywhere from 3/4 inch and sometimes down to 1/2 inch, but most of the times your zone valves will be about 3/4 of an inch. So from that valve, what happens is, let's say this is your main line coming from that city water. It comes into your valve here. So that's what we call your main line. And what that means is there's always water pressure in this pipe. It's called static water pressure. So we don't want to just go cutting into this pipe because water comes shooting out. From the valve going back, this is the part if you find some water bubbling up out of the ground or something like that, we do request you find a licensed irrigator. There are ones that are going to be more well versed on turning off the water back at your double check to cut this pipe and repair it. Now, if you are done this before, that's called a quick fix. We encourage you to make sure all your valve and pipes are repaired and not leaking. So don't ever let it go for too long or continue to use it for too long without getting it repaired. Now, what happens is this is where that electricity stops, like I told you about. The top of your valve, this is called the solenoid. I call it kind of the brains of your valve. Your irrigation controller sends a signal through these wires that says open and close. When it opens, the water, that static water pressure coming from your main line, then goes gushing through this valve to the other pipe on the other side, which is then called your lateral line. Your lateral lines are where all of your sprinkler heads, your drip, everything is attached to. So when that valve opens up and all that water pressure goes gushing through there, that's what tells those sprinkler heads to pop up, the water come out of your drip, or even on rotor sprinkler heads. So remember, always keep these valve boxes exposed. I know a lot of people say they really hate the look of them, but they've been really nice to create green ones to go in your grass and even brown ones to go in your flower beds to match the mulch. But you always want to know where these are for the valves, because if one of these valves go out and you do have to hire a licensed irrigator at an average rate of $100 to $125 an hour to locate this valve, that's going to be a little bit more money than you're probably wanting to spend. But keeping it always exposed makes it more accessible and easy to get to for repairs. Now, you probably noticed this other piece hanging off the backside of this valve right here. This piece right here is a Y filter or strainer. So on the inside of it, there's actually a strainer or a filter. And what this does is our municipal water we classify as hard water. So it's got a lot of calcium and lime and salt in it. This helps filter out some of those components in your water so that it doesn't clog up your irrigation. Kind of like your sprinkler heads, or not your sprinkler heads, your shower heads, your kitchen faucets might have that white, crusty kind of buildup on there, or even at the bottom of some of your potted plants. This helps strain out some of that. Now, you don't get that buildup if you do things like rainwater harvesting. The rainwater doesn't have that lime calcium buildup in there. Now, it also is a pressure reducer. Now, you're probably wondering, why would we need to reduce pressure? Now, you can determine the pressure on your home by doing a PSI valve on your outside faucet of your home. You screw this onto the outside faucet, open up that faucet all the way, and it's going to tell you your pressure. The average pressure for a home can be anywhere from 35 to 60 psi. Now, we have some communities where that psi can be as much as 100 psi. And that's where you get typically that fogging that comes out of your sprinkler heads, where it's nice during a hot summer day, but it's not giving you any efficiency in watering your plants. So sometimes we have to slow that water down to a pressure that's more recommended to use our irrigation sprinkler heads, and drip irrigation especially, because drip runs off of about 15 to 25 psi. Our other nozzles work well off of 35 to 60 psi, but it's still a good opportunity to slow down the water at the valve. Now, yes, we can also put a pressure reducer all the way back at your backflow from the city meter, and that definitely does require a licensed irrigator. But this is something you can add yourself, because the pressure reducer does go at the side of the valve where there is no static pressure. So there's no water running through this unless this valve opens up. So this slows down the water. It helps filter that water before it then goes into the lateral line. So many different valves. This one right here is a large valve, but it does show you the inside of the valve. And I can turn this where you can see how it opens up, and I can actually push this valve that's actually pushes this up, and that's where the water pressure goes through. So this is where our water pressure comes in here. And then when the valve opens up and this piece lifts up, the water pressure then goes gushing through here out into the lateral line in your sprinkler system. So that's how the valve works. And again, this is the solenoid that says open and close, with the wire from your irrigation controller. So that's the basics of the valves in your irrigation system. Just keep in mind the things of look inside those valve boxes from time to time so that you don't see water bubbling up and accumulating on the inside. That could mean you have a leak around the valve or even down the pipe somewhere that's traveling into the valve box. But always a good idea to open these up and check these from time to time to make sure everything's going all right. Wires aren't getting cut or chewed on. And that everything's going to operate properly for you. And that's part of your irrigation checks, is turning on those zones, kind of walking through, keep those irrigation flags on hand so you can check those as well. Now,
All right. So you covered a lot in that one. Do
Still a
we
lot more
have?
to cover.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do we have any questions for Patrick in reference to what we covered so far?
And while we wait for questions, I will point out one of the the biggest things and questions we get from people are about those valve boxes and the valve covers, and always keeping those exposed. And I kind of mentioned out some average dollar amounts for the hourly rate of irrigators. And if they do have to do a valve locator, which they use an actual kind of a sonar type system to locate the valves, it takes time because they have to attach it one end of the wire at the controller, and then they have like with almost like a metal detector, and they seek out and they look for the end of that wire. But if the end of that wire has been cut in along that line, they still have to visually go look for that valve, and it can take a long time. So always keep those valve boxes exposed. Again, the brown covers, I mean, there's options out there. I let some of my plants kind of grow to hide it a little bit, but I never let mulch and grass grow over it. And I also have taken my own site plan or survey of my home, and I've mapped out where my valve boxes and where my sprinkler heads are located at, so that I have that little key going on and I keep it with my irrigation controller. And that's something we would recommend as well, is to give yourself that information, those instructions, because between now and later in the summer, when you might have a problem, you might forget where those valves were.
All right, thank you, Patrick. We have a comment, beautiful landscape. So
It's one that I
that's
designed for my colleague Clint. So he's
uh,
a little Clint is we have cleverly turned him into a plant addict. As horticulturalists, we just call ourselves professional plant addicts. So we kind of bring people into the mess of it, and he's one of them.
right. Okay, so we are having a few people saying they having a little bit of issues here hearing the video. Just make sure you guys have your all of your volumes up on the application as well as on the your computer. Okay, do you have any recommendation for flower, trees, plants that don't require a lot of water?
Well, as far as your plant palette, so yeah, we're talking about irrigation here. My colleague Daniel was earlier in the week talking about his spill. We call this one piece of the bigger puzzle. There's many pieces that go into what we call water efficiency. Being better stewards of that water, and being as efficient as possible as we can with it. And so there are very hefty plant lists all around based on your region. We're working on making more regional plant palettes for the people that are listening that are in Houston and the Austin Round Rock area. We do have a nice plant list on our website, and that will continue to grow as we regionally put that together. The importance of it when it comes to nice plants and flowers is know your hardiness zone. That is very, very important, and something we learned the hard way in 2021 with the 100-year freeze. So it's important for you to really be better educated consumers. Don't just impulse buy those plants at the nursery or at the big box stores because they're blooming. I'm here to tell you not all those plants are right for our area. So just be that better educated consumer. And you're welcome to attend any of our programs where we talk about the different types of plants. One of my favorite programs is about landscape design and kind of going into the different texture combinations and color combinations. So just be better informed when you're out there shopping, and make sure that you're not that impulse buyer. There's a reason they put all that bubble gum and the candy bars and everything right by the register to entice you to buy those things. So pay attention to what they're doing at that very same thing in the nurseries as well.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Let's continue with the video.
Now, once we get through the lateral line coming out to the one side of your valve, then we have to get into what I like to call your delivery system. Your delivery system can be anything from large rotor heads, pop-up sprinkler heads, or even drip tubing. Now, drip tubing is, in the state of Texas, required in all parkways and medians. 48 inches or less has to be drip irrigation. Some cities have taken that larger to 60 inches. And basically what that means is that parkway on the other side of your sidewalk, between your sidewalk and street, we don't want spray irrigation there, because we do our best with nozzles that are designed for parkways and medians, because some of y'all may still have older systems that have spray in there, but it still oversprays, causes a lot of runoff, waters the concrete. We don't have to water concrete to watch it grow. It's growing all around us no matter what, but we don't want to be spraying that concrete. So drip irrigation works really well. There is subsurface drip that even grows underneath turf grasses. But this is your primary delivery system. And so let's go over each one of these so you understand the components and how each one of them operates. So I like to start with the rotor sprinkler head. The rotor sprinkler head typically comes with this universal key like you see right here. The key on top of there's two ends to the key. The first one that has the two little sides of it goes in the part that's shaped like it. This determines the radius or the pattern of the sprinkler head. I can then take that out and use the metal piece to put in where it says the plus and minus, and that determines the throw. So those are two terminologies that you need to understand. The throw determines how far the sprinkler head's going to spray, and with adjustable heads like this, you can adjust that. The pattern is the basic, the geometry you thought you'd never use again: 90 degrees, 180, 270, 360. So kind of like the corner of a sidewalk in a driveway, that's 90 degrees. So that helps you adjust the pattern. Most rotors are adjustable from 270 all the way down to about 45 degrees. And then you buy the spray head based on what's called head-to-head coverage. So your rotors, and I'll talk more about this with pop-ups as well, you need to measure from one sprinkler head to the next. Literally take your tape measure outside and measure from one sprinkler head to the next. And if they are 10 feet apart, then you need to buy a rotor or a nozzle that allows you to spray a 10-foot radius. Remember, we're measuring the half distance of a circle. So you need to buy that 10-foot radius. You want your sprinkler heads kind of having a water fight with each other. And the reason for that is, going back to what I said about our water being hard water, is over time these plastic components with that hard water can wear down a little bit. Not that they still can't function efficiently, but instead of them spraying all the way from head to head, they can start spraying less, not as far as they used to. And with head-to-head coverage, it ensures that the overlapping, you don't get any dry spots, and you still get that nice coverage in your irrigation or in your landscape. So that's the importance of head-to-head coverage. So remember that. Measuring your sprinkler heads, that's something you're going to want to do if you are looking to replace some of your sprinkler heads. Now, to show you some of the components of a rotor sprinkler head, this is a great close-up right here that shows you how the key goes inside the sprinkler head so that it can be adjusted, and turning the inside components. You see how the sprinkler head's turning? That determines our pattern. And when you look on the inside, you can see as I turn the sprinkler head, oh, is my key in there? This is great about live. You can hear that component's turning, and that's the pattern, how it's changing the pattern. And you can see inside, the inside of your sprinkler heads, they're all spring loaded. They're all spring driven. So when the water pressure comes through the pipe at the base of it, it pushes this sprinkler head up and out of the ground. And that's where you then start seeing the spraying. And you can really see all those components on rotor heads, and the engineering that really goes into those sprinkler heads. So that's the rotor sprinkler head. These are the ones that you see with the big string. Typically you see on big landscapes or sports fields, golf courses, things like that. Now let's go to the most.
All right. Thanks, Patrick, for showing us the inside of the sprinkler. I never knew they were spring loaded like that. I mean, I don't have sprinkler system at my home, but I have friends that do, that have those.
You know, and I always tell people that you're probably being more efficient than those with automatic sprinklers because, you know, back in the day, we used to call ourselves hose draggers, where you had to attach the sprinkler at the end of the hose, drag the hose, set the kitchen timer. We had eyes on the water then, and we were more efficient. And, you know, we saw that as our money kind of going down the drain. So I think we were more efficient before the automatic sprinkler. Irrigators don't like me to say that, though.
I'm not sure if I'm jumping ahead, but I have a question from Doreen. She says, I have a large spot in my yard, about 3 to 4 feet in size, that seems to stay wet. Is there any way to determine what could be causing this?
Yeah, that could be several different things. That could be a sign of just poor drainage. Remember, the lowest spot in your landscape can hold water. And that's something that you need to, you know, look closer at to see if it is a drainage issue. Drainage can travel underground as well. So sometimes poor drainage can cause water to accumulate in that low spot in your landscape, but also leaks in irrigation systems. If it is not a constant flow of water where you see water traveling or bubbling, that could mean that the leak is just coming on from the lateral lines only when your sprinkler system is running. Now, if it's a constant wet and there's a constant flow to the water, it could be coming from the lateral line. Or not lateral line, main line. The main line, remember, has that static pressure. So it always has water pressure built up in the line. And if a little crack can happen, and it can happen from tree roots and settling of soil, then water could be coming out of that pipe consistently. One way to check this, and you heard Jessica talk about this before, is to go all the way back to your city meter. Make sure your sprinkler system is off. Everything is off on the inside of your home as well. Nothing's running, including toilets. And look to see if your city meter is turning, if those numbers are getting higher. That tells you there's still water flowing somewhere, if in the house or in the landscape, when everything's turned off. So that could be a leak from the irrigation system. It could be a leak from the foundation. So there's different ways of isolating that as well. So as irrigators, what we do is we look at that city meter, but we turn off the water at that backflow device, that double check. That stops any water from going into your main lines. And if that city meter is still turning up, then that tells us the leak is coming from the home. Now, if the city meter stops turning, then 90% of the time that tells us the leak is coming from the irrigation system.
I got another question for you, Patrick. How often should I check my system to make sure it's properly working? How often should you do that?
Well, I always turn the question on the person asking the question. How often do you get your water bill? Every month. Every month you're using that automatic sprinkler system, you should be checking it. And checking it can be something as simple as, like I do. Like I know Sundays are my day to water. We know early morning is the best time to irrigate your landscape. So that's when I'm enjoying my coffee and it's not 100 degrees outside yet. And I'll be looking as my system is running its cycles to see what's happening and what's going on. And fortunately, I did that check here recently, getting prepared for everything. And sure enough, I found a broken sprinkler head in my front yard that was shooting water straight up in the air. But fortunately, again, I was not running irrigation through the winter months because we haven't needed to irrigate. And so I didn't know the sprinkler head was broken, but knowing that it might need to be used here pretty soon because we've been pretty dry, I went ahead and did a check. And sure enough, I found it. One broken sprinkler head can waste in the upwards of 200 gallons of water per runtime. So that's a lot of water.
That is a lot of water. Thank you, Patrick. Let's continue with our video.
Most common type of sprinkler head, which we see in residential, and that's the pop-up sprinkler head. Now, the pop-up sprinkler head is just like it says, it pops up out of the ground. And like the rotor head, you can see on the inside of this one, it's just spring driven. So the water pressure comes through here to the bottom, and it then pushes the sprinkler head up out of the ground. This one's a lot more simple engineering than the rotor head. You can see how just a very simple spring on the inside. And that's what I want to show you, is that when you're adjusting pop-up sprinkler heads or even rotor sprinkler heads, you're going to have to do that while the sprinkler system is running. I hope many of y'all aren't coming to this program to learn how to adjust sprinklers without getting wet. We just got wet checking this sprinkler system and finding some of the problems. But what that means is when your sprinkler head pops up out of the ground and you notice that it's spraying some concrete and not the grass, you need to take a hold of this riser and you turn it. Now listen to it. It sounds awful. You're not doing anything wrong to the sprinkler head. That is just all those components on the inside turning on the inside plastic shell. That's all you're hearing. But it's important for you to turn this and get it to spray exactly where it needs to spray. Now, there are adjustable nozzles. I'm going to show you those here in just a second, that you can determine the pattern of your pop-up spray head and even the throw to a certain degree with pop-up sprinkler heads. But this is the most common. And to kind of show you how it's set up, your sprinkler heads can be anywhere from about 6 to 8 inches below ground. And this is typically what it looks like when it's in the ground. So let me screw these on so I can show you this. So this would be your soil level right here. So kind of what you're looking at the soil level. Your sprinkler head is attached to a riser in the ground. That riser is then attached to what's called a T on the inside that's then attached to your lateral lines, if you remember what those are, where the water comes gushing through. And this is where the water comes through and pops up into your sprinkler head from here. Now, this is very important with your irrigation checks because there are 4 points of threading on a sprinkler head that you can adjust yourself. And this is where we see a lot of the leaks and the inefficiencies. So your nozzle, actually, that's just a cap on this one. So your nozzle looks something like this. So this nozzle is what determines your pattern and the throw of your pop-up sprinkler head when it sprays out of the ground. And it even has this little filter at the bottom to help filter out some things that can get in your pipes, especially if you do any adjustments. You could get some debris in there. This threads onto the top of your sprinkler head like this. And I love showing you this part because there's these reverse pliers like you see right here that a lot of the brands sell that go on sprinkler heads to keep them from popping back down. This is a great about $10 tool for you to keep, for you to make adjustments in your own sprinkler system. They're reverse pliers, but the great thing about it is, let's say I'm changing out my nozzles, and I accidentally let go of it. Well, if you don't have these pliers, you then have to dig in the ground, unscrew your entire sprinkler head to push that riser back up. But these reverse pliers allow me to get in there and pull the riser right back up, just like that. It's that simple. So you don't have to do any digging to change a nozzle when you're doing something like this. So over time, with vibration, foot traffic, vehicles running over sprinkler heads, these threaded parts can come loose, just like anything else can come loose, like a jar lid or something like that. So they might just need to be tightened down. So my nozzle, I might need to tighten it down if I see water spraying out from the side of it. The cap of my sprinkler head also comes undone, and you're going to see the spring on the inside. That cap, these actually come loose a lot easier than other things do. These just need to be tightened back down. Vibration over time from water pressure can loosen them up. Your sprinkler head is threaded onto the riser, and then the riser is threaded into the pipe at the bottom. These are all quick check fixes that you can do yourself by just tightening everything back down. It really is as simple as that. And a lot of people say, well, what about the irrigators? Can't they come out and do it? Yes, they can do it. But remember, you're paying for them to come out. And licensed irrigators really don't care to do a lot of things like this, because it takes them time to drive to you, make the repair, and then leave and go to the next job. Just like a plumber coming out to change like a flap or something in your toilet that you could do yourself. They're looking to work with you on your valves and other big things that you really do need the help with. This right here, you can do yourself. Now you'll notice the riser. Now this is a special type of riser that we wanted to show you. And the great thing about this riser is, if you've ever changed a sprinkler head or needed to raise a sprinkler head up in your landscape, you can make multiple trips to the irrigation plumbing house to buy different length risers. And it can be quite annoying to do that. You see the different divisions on this riser. This allows you to take this home and cut to the length that you need and not have to go back and forth. And the great thing about it is they're really cheap, like $1.50 to purchase these. And so I can come in here and I can actually just cut this division off and determine where that sprinkler head needs to go. It really is that easy. So that's the makeup of your pop-up sprinkler head. And remember the nozzle at the top. Now, another feature about the nozzle at the top that I want to show you is keeping a little flathead screwdriver handy. And I don't see my flathead screwdriver, but what I want you to look at is the little screw at the very top of your nozzle. That little bitty screw, a lot of people think that's what holds that nozzle together, when in fact, that little screw actually allows you to adjust the throw of pop-up sprinkler heads within about a foot. Now, unlike the rotors, we don't make massive adjustments to that. So putting that little flathead screwdriver in there, when I loosen that screw, it allows me to increase the throw of my spray by about a foot. If I tighten it down, it reduces it about a foot. And the reason that's good is because some of y'all may go out there and measure your sprinkler heads and find out that you need 9-foot throw, like for your head-to-head coverage. Well, they don't sell 9-foot nozzles. They sell 8-foot, 10-foot, 12-foot. And so you could buy the 10-foot nozzle and you could tighten that screw down to pull it back 1 foot. And that's how you can make easy adjustments from there. So that's the components of a pop-up sprinkler head.
All right. So, Patrick, we have a question for you
Okay.
from Barbara. All right. This isn't a sprinkler question, and I'm a hose dragger. I need to create more slope from the foundation on out. I live in a neighborhood that is on clay. What kind of dirt or soil should I order to put next to my foundation where I can order it from? Where can I order it from? Should I put a black screening down first next to the foundation before placing the soil on, or is it better to put down rocks to create slope away from the foundation? I don't know if you can answer that.
Well, and that's a complicated question to answer over the call without seeing the situation. And we refer to foundation companies when it comes to what we should and should not be doing up against foundations. And you always want to leave about 3 inches of the foundation below your mortar line. Your mortar line is brick, stucco, siding, whatever you have on your home. You always want to leave about 3 inches of the foundation exposed, not covered up with soil, not covered up with rock, because if you do pile that up, you're creating an avenue for a lot of those invasive insects like termites and wood ants, things like that, from getting in there. Creating a slope, if the foundation, if the water is, like, say this is your foundation and your ground is sloped, it's hard to do this backwards on camera. It's sloped towards your foundation, then yes, you want to kind of build up to drain away from your foundation. Too much water up against your foundation is just as bad as too little water up against your foundation. And there's different types of soil. If you have heavy clay soil, we also recommend good, healthy, landscaped and well-planned landscape around your foundation is even better than watering your foundation individually, because we're holding moisture, managing the moisture more, meaning if it's too much, we can pull moisture away. And that root system keeps that soil more porous and shades the foundation from drying out. There's many benefits to foundation plantings around the home. So if you're doing something like that, a good bedding soil and mulch on top of that is recommended. But if you're going to be regrading just in general, we do have some people that do a gravel band around their foundations to help splash guards, moisture control. And I would use a simple gravel, not pea gravel. Pea gravel shifts and moves, but you could do something a little bit more jagged so that it locks in place. And from there, you're going to want to make sure you put what we call filter fabric underneath that rock. Many people know filter fabric as weed fabric. We're not fans of weed fabric. It doesn't work. It's a marketing thing. But we use the same fabric to put under all of our hardscape, rock, gravels, so that it keeps it from mixing in with the soil and it always stays in place, but it still allows moisture to go through. So that's one thing you can do, but check the pitch and grade. The pitch and the grade up against your foundation, in order for it to drain, does not have to be great. It doesn't have to be a real heavy hill or slope. It's just for added drainage. And many people even look into adding drainage systems under the soil, like a French drain as well, but you can do a rock or gravel band around that too.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. All right, we have one more sprinkler question and then we'll continue with our video. My sprinkler head will often pop up and then not go back down. Do I need to replace the sprinkler head, or could cleaning the sprinkler head solve the problem?
Yeah, it could be cleaning the sprinkler head. We get debris and other things down. So remember I was talking about all those threaded parts. Well, at the cap, which is the top part of that sprinkler head that unthreads, there's a rubber gasket where the riser comes popping up out of it. And you can get debris around that that prevents it from popping back down. The spring inside can also get a kind of rusty and stiff if it's a really old sprinkler head, where it doesn't always pop back down as well. So it could be cleaning, but it also could just be a really old sprinkler head that needs to be replaced. It's not an uncommon thing to happen. We just tell people to kind of pop it, with your foot, and it should pop back down. If it doesn't pop back down, then yes, you probably need a new sprinkler head. But as long as you don't have water bubbling up and coming out around your sprinkler head and not being efficient, then you don't necessarily have to spend the money on a new sprinkler head.
All right, so one last question. Where do we find parts for the irrigation system? Where would you recommend going to find irrigation system parts?
Well, that's a really, really great question. Many of our wholesale providers, and I'll list them off here in a minute, they're really great. They have opened their doors to retail because they know that you, the general public, are not necessarily getting not only the selection, but the quantities, the quality that you need at the big box stores. So we do steer some people away from big box stores. Minor PVC fittings just for convenience, ones and twosies. The big box store is still really great for that. But if you want to change all your nozzles, all your sprinkler heads, you can go to these wholesalers and they will sell to you, but they ask that you not come in the door and ask them, what do you need? You need to put some thought into this, know how many nozzles, what kind of, how many sprinkler heads, that sort of thing that you need before you go in. Now, speaking for the rest of the state, there's many, many small irrigation plumbing houses that are open to the public. Some of the bigger brands that are statewide are like Longhorn Irrigation, Site One, and Site One used to be John Deere. So if you have a site one around you, they're really good as well. There's irrigators. So there's many different wholesalers that are open to the public. And of course, small towns, I know up in North Texas, McKinney has their own little irrigation house. So there's many smaller companies, and we like supporting small business.
All right. Thanks, Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's keep rolling this presentation.
So now let's talk a little bit about drip irrigation. Drip irrigation can be a lot of fun to kind of play around with. There's a lot of different pieces and parts and fittings that put the different drip tubings together. This is all 1/2 inch drip that I have right here. This is 1/4 inch drip tubing, which I like to call kind of spaghetti tubing. It's a lot smaller, and there are even parts and components for it as well to help piece it all together. But this can be a lot of fun to kind of think through. If any of y'all ever played with those Link or Connect type toys when you were kids, it's kind of the same principles. I almost wonder if somebody thought of it from those types of toys when we were kids. Drip is the most efficient form of irrigation that we can teach you, short of just not irrigating at all. It's 90% efficient. It gets covered up by mulch, out of sight, out of mind. You don't have to look at it. You don't have to worry about it. And it puts water where the water needs to go, at the root of the plant. We ask this a lot in our seminars. We ask people, do the leaves of plants actually need water? And the answer is no. The roots of the plants need water. So spraying irrigation can be efficient in some instances, whereas drip irrigation is more efficient, especially putting the water back at the roots of the plant. Because some of y'all in your landscapes may have risers. And we're talking about those risers that have the same nozzles that your pop-up sprinkler heads have. And they start growing with the shrubs because you have to spray over the shrubs to get to the plants in front of them. That is the perfect opportunity to take that water back down to the ground, get rid of those risers, and convert to drip irrigation. And it is very easy to do. And I'm going to show you a part that you can purchase to do yourself. This part. Now, this is not a sprinkler head. This is a drip conversion adapter. This replaces your sprinkler head. So what you would do in your system is you would go through and remove a pop-up sprinkler head where you're wanting to change to drip. We will put the conversion adapter in its place. And the great thing about these conversion adapters is if I open up to show you what's inside, you might recognize this part if I can get it out. Again, great things about live TV. It has this filter strainer on the inside. So your conversion adapter is it's not a sprinkler head anymore. It has the filter on the inside. The top part of the conversion adapter is the pressure reducer. Remember I said drip runs off of about 15 to 25 PSI, so we have to really slow the water down. This conversion adapter does just that at the top of this, what used to be your sprinkler head. I don't think I got the filter in there right. There we go. And then it screws on like that. Now from that top piece, we can put an adapter like this on the top because it already comes threaded. I screw that on, and from there is where I can attach my drip tubing to run through all my flower beds. Because remember, this is at soil level right here. So now all my drip tubing is running directly off of this. Now what this means is if you convert a flower bed to drip irrigation, is you have to convert the entire bed to drip, that entire zone. You cannot mix drip and spray irrigation together because one of them goes off gallons per minute and one of them goes off gallons per hour. So we do have to run our drip irrigation considerably longer than we do our spray irrigation, but it's still efficient because it's putting out like 0.6 gallons of water per hour at each emitter, whereas each nozzle of our spray head puts out a lot more water. So I can run the drip directly off of there. You don't need to change every sprinkler head. Let's say you're changing one or converting one flower bed and you have 5 spray heads in that bed. You may only need 1 or maybe 2 conversion adapters, which means you can cap off all your other sprinkler heads in that system and you end up with only 2 of these to run all your drip tubing off of. So again, no more spraying windows or sidewalks or your cars. All the water's gone back down to where it needs to go at the soil and at the root of the plant. It really is as simple as that. I can't express enough how simple this conversion adapter has made things for converting to drip in our irrigation systems. So now, drip tubing, unlike our pop-up spray heads, the great thing about pop-up spray heads is all your nozzles that you buy, if you change them out, they're universal. So if you have a Rainbird sprinkler head, you can use a Hunter nozzle if it's more cost effective for you, and you can do Netafim, whatever. It doesn't matter which brand you use. With drip tubing, as of right now, what drip tubing you buy, you have to buy the fittings that go with that drip tubing. So right here we have Netafim drip tubing. We have to use the Netafim fittings because that's the only fitting that will fit in this drip tubing. If we don't use the right fittings, what happens is when we turn on the water, all your tubing can start blowing apart and coming apart. So as of right now, we recommend that you do use all the brands fittings for the tubing that you buy. So just make sure you're doing brand to brand, brand specific for your drip tubing. Then for drip tubing, you're going to keep all these parts. So you got elbows, you've got T's, all these little fittings, and there's even drip cutters. Now, what's great about these drip cutters, and these are fancy, nice little blacked out cutters, is it cuts through the drip tubing just like a pair of scissors, just like that. And the end right here that kind of looks like a hook, it allows you to go into the end of the drip tubing and kind of widen it out and kind of loosen it up. So then you can put your fitting in a lot easier. Now, these are called barbed tees, is what this type of fitting is called. And so these little barbed fittings, what they do is, I don't know if you remember the old kind of Chinese fingers. You put two fingers in, and if you keep pulling, they can't get, they come out. Same thing works with this. These barbed tees keep the fitting in place in the drip tubing. I would recommend that you wear gloves when you do this part because your hands can get a little raw, kind of messing with this fitting, but you're really going to just kind of work it in, kind of muscle it in to where it gets over the two barbed tees, and that fitting is now in place in that drip tubing. That's as simple as it is. Now, you're not going to need a whole lot of these fittings, especially for large beds, because you can loop your drip tubing back around. And the other thing you have to remember is, so this is called inline drip tubing. So inline means that it already has the emitters spaced out for you in the tubing. In this case, this tubing is at 12-inch spacing. So each one of these emitters in each line are 12 inches apart. Well, depending on what size spacing you buy on your drip tubing determines how far apart your rows should be. So if I buy 12-inch spaced emitters, then each row of my drip tubing needs to be 12 inches apart. If I buy 18 foot, they need to be 18, or not 18 foot, 18 inches. Then I have to buy 18 or space them out 18 inches apart. It's as simple as that. There's no real math to that otherwise. You run this through all your flower beds, especially getting around the root zones of all your plants. And you have to do what's called a looped system when you do this. So we teach a really great online class for that to show you how to convert to drip irrigation. What that means is when you lay out your inline drip tubing, that tubing needs to come back in and loop back into itself at some point. We can't just cap off the end. That's because this tubing is designed to have pressure that builds up in the tubing. So each one of these little emitters is putting out the same amount of water when it's irrigating in your landscape. So those are some of the fun toys and components that you can put for drip tubing. The other thing you can do if you're like some of the people that have trouble letting go of seeing the water spraying in their landscape, you can purchase little indicator heads like this. And what this does is there's a little fitting that attaches to the drip tubing. And when you turn on that drip tubing, this little guy pops up. So it tells you your drip tubing is running. So you don't have to be digging around and looking for water coming out of there. So it just pops up. It tells you that it's running and you're good to go. It's a little indicator head that you can put in your landscape. There's even some that have a little flag that kind of pops up. It's not required. You don't have to have this. Just some people want to make sure that things are operating. Part of your irrigation checks, you can go around and make sure these are popping up and that your drip tubing is actually operating and popping up. All right.
All right, awesome. So you don't have to put a little like fitting around it to keep those tight. They stay in place once you put them in.
Yeah, it's kind of like the old Chinese fingers. Once that tubing goes over that, it does not come back off. And there's actually some fittings that are universal where the tubing goes inside and it just works the opposite. So the old Chinese fingers that once it gets over there, it's not coming off. But you got to get it over those barbed tees. Some people don't put the tubing all the way up, and that's where that tool where it helps widen the end to get that fitting in is very, very helpful because your hands get tired after a while when you're doing that. So that's why I always recommend the gloves and that tool.
All right. Got some questions in the chat.
Okay.
All right. Do you recommend DIY irrigation system, or should I get someone to do it professionally as a rule?
Okay, so I'm gathering that we're talking about an entirely new system. I would recommend that you employ somebody, because whether you or somebody else does it, you have to get your municipality involved, because there is permitting and inspections that have to be done. And the permitting, your backflow device has a serial number on it, and that has to be permitted through your municipality and inspected. And that's going to be much more difficult for you to do than an irrigator to do. Now, we have had many people that still want to be involved with this process. And the whole point of this whole program is, again, to make you a better educated consumer, whether you do it yourself or not. And you could always have an irrigator get the system, the piping, the valves, the wiring, which can be a little bit tricky, especially if it's a 2-wire system. Get all that installed, and then you're welcome to install your own drip. You can even install your own sprinkler heads and valves, but it really, that's the least expensive part of an entire irrigation system. People don't realize that's why we always cover this infrastructure of the backflow device, the pipes, the valves, the valve covers. Those are the more expensive parts of the irrigation system. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, if you're looking for a whole new system, I would employ an irrigator from the beginning.
Right. Thank you for that, Patrick. Our next question, how do you install a rain gauge? I don't know if this is a little off topic, but can you give us a little insight? Do you have
That's
any
all right. I
experience
mean,
with that?
the important, there's many different types of rain gauges out there. In my experience, I have found that the plastic ones do not hold up to our sun and our temperatures here in Texas. So I've gone to more of a glass rain gauge myself. The key to rain gauges are, you want them to be free of any overhang. So overhang from your house or gutters, overhang from trees and leaves, because that can accumulate more water and pour more water into your rain gauge than what you're actually getting. So if you want to do a rain gauge, it needs to be in an open space. So you're actually getting that full rain measurement, and not an accumulation from other surfaces.
All right. One last question before we continue our presentation.
Mhm.
If we have a leak from the meter to the other device next to the house, should we call the city to check it out, or should we call a plumber?
Well, if you know that you've done the check like we talked about, and you went to your city meter and you looked for that turning, and you know it's coming from the irrigation system, you need to hire an irrigator. If you know the leak is coming from the house, then you need to hire a licensed plumber. So those are the two different trades. One's dealing with outdoors and one's dealing with indoors.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Let's continue with our presentation.
So now I want to talk a little bit going to the actual controller of your irrigation system. This is a newer version of an irrigation controller. The one thing I want to point out to people is, if your irrigation controller doesn't allow you to have multiple programs, like program A, B, C, and D, and if your controller does not allow you to attach a rain and freeze sensor to your controller, it's time for a new controller. The reason for that is because your irrigation controller acts like an alarm clock. It allows you to run multiple programs for, like, a cycle and soak, running through multiple cycles to reduce or eliminate runoff in your system. But also, your rain and freeze sensor turns off your controller at about 38 degrees, so you don't have freezing irrigation going everywhere. It also turns it off at about 3/8 of an inch of rainfall, so you're not that neighbor that's irrigating their landscape in the rainfall outside. But it might be time for you to upgrade your irrigation controller. The other great thing, what I've done again on my system, is I've upgraded to a controller that allows me to operate from my cell phone. So there's no back and forth to my controller. In fact, I don't remember the last time I actually went to my controller. I can turn off my controller, I can run it manually, run through my system, all from the luxury of my cell phone. And I think a lot of y'all that are tech savvy will really enjoy that and like that, have that luxury of operating from your phone, because I think a lot of people are doing that nowadays. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to point out is all the different components for those people that they like to call hose draggers, that still irrigate their landscape the old-fashioned way, as I like to say. In a lot of ways, I think we were more efficient then because we had eyes on the water. We knew where we wanted it to go, where we didn't want it to go, and we certainly didn't want it running down the driveway because we really saw that as our money running down the driveway. There are many different types still offered today at most hardware stores of different sprinklers that attach to the end of a water hose. The one tip that I will tell you about these is get some of these sprinklers like you see here that put out really big drops of water. You don't want anything that does a fine mist. The bigger drops of water are heavier, so they're going to fall, and you're going to be more efficient with spraying in your irrigation system. And then always at the end of your water hose, have some type of nozzle, even adjustable, that has different settings on it for you to be able to hand water plants. But don't allow water just to constantly run out of your water hose. You just don't realize the pressure that's coming out of your water hose is the same pressure coming out of your kitchen faucet. And you probably wouldn't leave your kitchen faucet just running for minutes, if not an hour on end. So don't leave your water hose running like that, because that water coming out of your water hose costs the same as the water coming out of your kitchen faucet. So just remember big drops of water. Some of the newer technologies that we've even gone to within the irrigation system for those big drops of water are more improved nozzles like this one that's called a multi-stream rotor nozzle. This multi-stream rotor nozzle, if you look in here closely, you'll kind of see the teeth that are in there. Those teeth create streams. So instead of having kind of a fan effect going in our sprinkler system, it creates streams. And those bigger drops of water I'm talking about, and these can be about 60% more efficient than some of the standard nozzles that many of y'all may have, where you get that misting and that fogging occurring. Some other more new technology for those of y'all that do have high pressure in your irrigation system is converting your sprinkler heads. So this is a pop-up sprinkler head that has a special piece in the top. Just like your drip conversion adapter, this has a pressure reducer in it. So if you are one of those people that does have 100 PSI and you're getting that fogging and misting coming out of your sprinkler system, and you really don't want to spend the money of putting a pressure reducer back on the valve, you can change your sprinkler heads to these pressure regulating sprinkler heads to slow down the water. And what this does is, again, let's say you have that 5-head zone in your sprinkler system, you would need to change all 5 heads to these pressure regulating heads. And it balances the pressure between all 5 heads and puts out the same amount of pressure, so you no longer have that fogging and misting, and you have uniform precipitation rates in your landscape. So those are some of the newer technologies that are out there to make it more efficient. And some of the basic parts and components, we could go on for hours with all the different types of brands and some of the clever stuff they're coming out with. They even have micro drip tubing that's made out of soaker hose material. Again, we could go on and on about this, but that's the basics of your parts and components of your sprinkler system. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. Let us know if there's something specific in your system, and we'll do our best to help you out.
Awesome presentation, Patrick. Thank you very much. So let's go to a poll question. We're gonna set this poll question up. You can answer it. And while we do that, I have one. Let's go over the poll question. Okay, how often should you water grass in winter months? Now I'm going to see if we have any more questions, and we'll answer these questions while the audience answers the poll question. Okay, so I had an interesting one that I wanted to pull up. I missed that one. All right, so Barbara asks, can you talk about how to prevent leaks in water pipes and in the sewer pipes?
How to prevent them? Well, I think the most that we see leaks in the irrigation system comes from other elements, typically tree roots, shifting and movement in the soil. Those typically are where we get the non-contact type leaks. Now, many leaks also come from digging and different type of work happening in the landscape. A lot of people don't realize that, yeah, they don't think they hit that pipe that they found while they were planting that new plant, but they actually did cause a crack in it, and that crack can grow and cause more problems. So that's just paying attention to where everything is. If you did hit it with your shovel, look really closely at it to make sure you didn't cause a leak. Now, a sewer pipe, that we see a lot of sewer pipe that also is tree root related, especially in the older cast iron sewer lines. PVC, we have less of a problem with that. The other thing is if it's a very well-versed licensed irrigator or plumber, they're going to use as few fittings as possible. And the fittings are what we glue all the pipe together. So couplings and elbows and T's, because at those unions is where we see the most leaks, not just broken pipe, but at those unions. So those are really the only thoughts that I have on preventing leaks. As long as the system's put in properly and very well by a licensed irrigator, or repairs are done properly by an irrigator or yourself, you shouldn't see a whole lot of leaks. But don't forget that things do age. You know, when I moved into my house, it's a 1960s house. And it was one of the 60s neighborhoods that actually they put irrigation systems in. I was replacing a lot of copper in my irrigation system and having to overhaul almost the whole thing. So age does play a factor in that as well. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Patrick. All right, let's see the results to this poll. Okay. Rarely. Excellent. That's the answer, rarely. So 66% of us got the answer correct. So we are becoming irrigation experts. Thank you, Patrick, for providing such a informative masterclass so far. All right, we have another question. How do we cap off an existing head?
So we do that a lot when it comes to converting from spray to drip. And there's several easy ways to do this. So when you remember in the video where I was talking about where the sprinkler head is attached to the riser, and that riser then is attached to the pipe, what you can do is remove that sprinkler head, and you can buy a threaded cap. If most times your sprinkler heads are going to be about 1/2-inch pipe, and you buy a threaded cap at the hardware store. We really do recommend you use Teflon tape on all threaded parts, just like you would do indoors with a shower head or a faucet. Put that Teflon tape on and tighten that cap down very tightly. Now, if you want to take that cap all the way down to the pipe, there's a female thread and a male thread cap. So the female thread has the thread on the inside. The male thread has the thread on the outside. So the female thread is what you would thread onto the riser, like I was just talking about. The male thread is if you take that riser out of the pipe that's deep down in the ground, you can put that male cap in that as well. Just remember, Teflon tape, tighten as tightly as you can to prevent leaks. And it's as simple as that.
All right, so the questions are coming in heavy now.
Okay.
Let's go to the next one. The next question is, my water meter is at the front of my house. Do the city water lines run from the front street side of my house or from the back of my house?
Well, you'll know that based on where your city meter is. If your city meter's in the front of your house, then the pipes run from the front. If your city meter's in the back, then the pipes run from the back. Majority of the time, your city meter will come from the front. It's more accessible for repairs in the future.
All right, another question. Thank you for all of this great information, Patrick. We have an obvious leak somewhere in our irrigation system, but there's no noticeable pooling anywhere in the yard. Is there a logical way of isolating the leak without calling an irrigator?
So yes, if you're not seeing pooling water, sometimes, like you heard me say in that video, that water could be traveling into the valve box. And because water travels down that pipe and it can end up in the valve box. So if your valve box is always so full of water, even when it's not raining or you haven't run your irrigation system, that typically tells you the zone that leak is occurring in, and you know that it's happening somewhere in that area. And if it's always full of water and you're not running your sprinkler system, 9 times out of 10, it's coming from the main line. If it only gets water in it when you run your sprinkler system, then that's coming from the lateral line. Check all your sprinkler heads. Sometimes those leaks can happen at the base of that sprinkler head where that threading occurs, and that water's traveling underground instead of you seeing it at the top. I always recommend that you turn on that system. It's going to require you to get wet. So put your bathing suit on. I don't know what to tell you, but go out there, turn that sprinkler system and walk around, because if it is water that's coming through a pipe, majority of the time, water will be coming up through the ground at some point. Now, you could have really well-drained soil, in the Round Rock, Austin, even San Antonio area. Y'all have very rocky, sandy soil. So pooling water is not always a visible sign for you unless that sprinkler system is on. And this is why irrigation checks are important. Turn it on, walk around, and look to see if there's pooling occurring or water coming up out of the ground. It's usually very visible when you have a pretty serious leak.
Thanks, Patrick. All right, so we got a lot of questions, but we also have some more content to cover. Let's go to our next presentation, which is controller basics.
Okay.
Understanding your irrigation controller is key to a healthy and properly watered home landscape. Don't let your irrigation controller intimidate you. It's easy to operate once you know the terms and understand what each function controls. In fact, if you can program the alarm clock on your smartphone, you'll have no problem soaking up the skills to master your controller. Now let's go over some key settings on your irrigation controller. Station. On the controller itself, the term station refers to the valve that is being controlled. In most situations, one station controls one valve. Zone. The area that receives water is typically referred to as the station on the controller, but as the zone in your landscape. For instance, a flower bed may be considered one zone, while a section of turf grass in your backyard might be considered a separate zone. When programming your controller, map out your irrigation zones in advance. Your controller box should have a listing of each zone for reference. If this information has not already been written in, take a few moments to manually test each zone and fill in a short description for future reference. This easy step will save time and prevent future headaches. Program. Most timers have 3 to 4 programs available, and they're typically named Program A, Program B, Program C, or sometimes Program D. These programs hold the settings that dictate which days and how long each station is watered. Each program has its own start time, run time, and days of operation. You can use the programs to separate the zones that need different watering days or multiple start times. For example, Program A can be programmed to water all lawn zones 1 day per week, while Program B can be programmed to water native plant material in your landscape beds every other week. Start time. The start time feature on a controller allows you to specify a time of day for each program to start. Once the cycle starts, it will begin irrigating the stations that are associated with that start time. When the controller works its way through all the stations that are associated with the program, it stops watering. You can schedule multiple start times in a single program to reduce runoff with what we call the cycle and soak method. Runtime. Runtime refers to the time in minutes that a valve will remain open. If you set this for 10 minutes, the valve will stay open and water a zone for 10 minutes. If you have a runtime of 10 minutes and 2 start times, that zone will be watered twice for a total of 20 minutes. You can also conduct a catch can test to help determine how long it takes your zone's runtime to deliver 1 inch of water, which is the upper level of how much a zone might need during a drought period. Cycle. An irrigation cycle is a period of time when the sprinkler system is operating to supply water to the landscape. Auto. This is the automated start setting, meaning that when in auto, the system will run your program schedule. Off. We recommend leaving your controller in this default setting, especially when it has rained or when rain is in the forecast. Turning your system off does not undo your stored program, it simply tells the system not to come on or operate while in this setting. Keeping your system in the off position and then turning it on manually gives you the most control over how much water you're applying and can help to ensure that the system only runs at the most beneficial times for your plants. Manual. The manual operation button allows you to run an individual zone for a specified amount of time. It could be used to provide supplemental irrigation to areas that may need additional water. It could also be used to conduct a system checkup. Some controllers have both a manual and an all-system manual setting. Seasonal Adjust. The Seasonal Adjust button allows you to increase or decrease the amount of water being applied by 5 to 10% increments. This function can alter your watering time without having to change your station run times. For example, during extremely hot weeks of the year, you could increase the seasonal adjust from 100% to 120% if your lawn shows signs of wilt or stress. It's important to note that this feature adjusts the watering time for each zone, and you'll be applying 20% more water to your entire landscape at that 120% seasonal adjustment. Many native and adapted plants may not need additional irrigation, however, so use this feature with discretion. During most winters in North Texas, regular irrigation is not necessary, so consider turning irrigation controllers off during that period from November to March. Rain and freeze sensors. These inexpensive add-on components prevent the irrigation system from running during rain events or when temperatures fall below freezing. Freeze sensors can aid in preventing damage to irrigation systems or causing safety hazards. It's important to note that rain and freeze sensors are now a requirement for most systems in the state of Texas. The Cycle and Soak irrigation method. This simple technique is generally the most effective way to run your irrigation system. Some systems apply water faster than the ground could absorb. This is especially true in lawn areas with heavily sloped or compacted clay soils. No one likes to see water running off into the street. To help prevent this, you can irrigate these areas in several short intervals instead of one long run time. This allows you to pulse water into your landscape more gradually to improve absorption. The first cycle breaks up the surface tension and saturates the top layer of soil. The second cycle infiltrates the soil more efficiently and deeply after the first cycle. A third and sometimes a fourth cycle is beneficial if a slope is involved or if runoff occurs after the sprinklers run for just a few minutes. Most irrigation controllers have a way to set different start times. If you have the Cycle and Soak feature on your controller, then you can set your cycle or run time in minutes. With this feature, you don't have to set different start times for each zone. If you have trouble programming your controller, visit the company's website or contact their customer service for instructions for the Cycle and Soak. Most newer controllers have a Cycle and Soak setting in addition to other water-saving features which might warrant upgrading your older irrigation controller. When purchasing a new controller, make sure it's labeled by the EPA's WaterSense program, denoting the highest water-efficient products. For more in-depth information on how to program your brand and specific model of irrigation controller, conduct an internet search using the make and model. Most times you can find full digital instructions and even helpful video tutorials. Do you know your watering days? Watering before 10 a.m. or after 6 p.m. for residential addresses ending in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8 is permitted on Wednesdays and Saturdays. For residential addresses ending in 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9, Thursdays and Sundays are your watering days. Twice a week watering is the maximum allowed. To find out how much water your yard really needs, sign up for the weekly watering advice at waterisawesome.com or explore SaveFortWorthWater.org to get tips to save more water and money.
All right, excellent presentation on how to work the controller. So we got about, looks like 11 minutes left and we got a lot to cover. Let's get to a question. How long should we leave water running by hose dragging if you have no irrigation system?
Well, you need to check your system to determine how long you need to run it. So you saw the cycle and soak method, and that applies to hose draggers as well, because you can't always put water all out at once, especially if you're in a heavy clay soil. The soil doesn't accept that much water all at once, whereas sandy, rockier soils, it goes straight through. So cycle and soak really benefits both soil types by putting as little water out there as possible. Just make sure you're allowing it to rest in between. If you see water traveling down that sidewalk or concrete, that's telling you your soil is not accepting any more water right
All right. So another question, how should I protect my irrigation system during a freeze?
now. Well, even with last year's 100-year freeze, we do not have to winterize our systems here in Texas. Our soil temperature very rarely gets to freezing. Last time that happened was in 1980, and when it does get to freezing, it's really just the upper surface of soil, not deep down. Up in the northern hemisphere of the United States, the soil gets down to freezing very deep, and those pipes can freeze. Where ours does not, they're nicely insulated by our soil. So please don't overthink that. The key is to make sure that system's turned off during the winter.
All right, thanks, Patrick. Let's move on to our next presentation, irrigation best management practices.
Irrigation best management practices. Tips for a healthy lawn and landscape. If your irrigation system is not working properly, no matter how much you water, the landscape suffers and water is wasted. Follow these guidelines to ensure a properly watered landscape. 1. Check your irrigation system monthly for problems. Mark problem areas like misaligned heads or leaks with an irrigation flag to easily locate them when it's time to make repairs. 2. Mow at a higher setting. During the summer, raise the height on your mower by 1 to 2 notches. Taller grasses can help reduce evaporation of water from the soil, in addition to encouraging a deeper, healthier root system. 3. Water when needed, not just because it's your day to water. If it has just rained or if rain is in the forecast, it's better to hold off running your sprinklers. This can help prevent unnecessarily high water bills, along with preventing several pest and disease issues associated with overwatering. A soil moisture probe is an inexpensive tool that can be used to gauge soil moisture at a depth of 6 to 8 inches. 4. Water without creating runoff. For best results, use the cycle and soak method of irrigation. Using 2 to 3 shorter intervals rather than one long cycle allows for better absorption of water into the root zone. The goal is to keep all the water applied on the lawn and not running off down the street. 5. Water before 10 a.m. or after 6 p.m. This will help minimize water loss due to evaporation during the active growing season, which is usually from March to October. Watering in the winter is generally not necessary unless unusually dry conditions exist. 6. Consider hand watering new plants. There is no need to overwater an entire landscape if it's just a few plants that need extra attention. After plants are established, adjust your sprinkler runtime accordingly, tapering off to less frequent irrigation to help develop a deeper, healthier root system. 7. Change your sprinkler head spray nozzles. Water efficiently by installing multi-stream nozzles, which apply water in heavier water droplets over a longer time frame. With these products, less water is lost due to wind, evaporation, or runoff. 8. Install pressure regulating heads. Are you experiencing high pressure in your sprinkler system? Irrigation systems are designed to operate at around 40 psi. Pressure higher than this can cause excessive misting and overspray from your sprinkler heads. By installing pressure regulating heads, you can reduce pressure and ensure that water is hitting the ground where it can be most efficiently used. 9. Replace older irrigation controllers. Consider upgrading to a newer model that has water-conserving settings like cycle and soak or seasonal adjustment. Look for the EPA WaterSense label for the most efficient models. There are also many wireless controllers that can connect to your smartphone. 10. Install a rain and freeze sensor. These sensors prevent your automatic sprinkler system from coming on and applying water during a rain or freeze event, which helps deter water waste and prevents hazards. 11. Convert spray zones to drip irrigation. When properly designed, installed, and maintained, drip irrigation is the most efficient irrigation method. Up to 90% of the water is effectively delivered to the root zone. Subsurface drip tubing is also available for lawns. In some cases, drip irrigation is also exempt from watering restrictions.
All right, Patrick. All right, we got one question and then we're going to go to our last presentation. My outdoor faucets have water coming out where the knob goes into the faucet. No change to the pressure out of the faucet itself. Is this something I can fix myself?
So it sounds like on the exterior faucet, is there always water coming out of the thing? Then yes, that means the valve inside, that's a simple ball valve inside of your exterior faucet, that needs to be replaced. Typically, we do request, because that is connected to the pipes inside your home, you hire a licensed plumber to do this, because that typically requires soldering, making sure that there's no cross connection. Now, if it's just the water when you turn the water off and water comes shooting out the side, that's actually the backflow preventing water from going back in your home, and that's typical. But if it's just leaking when you're using it, it probably needs to be replaced.
All right. So last presentation of the day, irrigation quick fixes.
Irrigation quick fixes. These quick DIY repairs can help you reduce water waste and save money from costly leaks. Problem: sprinkler head spraying water onto the sidewalk, driveway, or road. Fix: redirect pop-up nozzles so that water is applied only on the landscape. If your spray pattern is greater than your landscaped area, you may need to replace the nozzle with a different spray pattern. Problem: spray nozzle missing, not operating, or reduce water flow. Fix: check nozzle and filter for damage, blockage, or replace the nozzle and filter. Problem: sprinkler head not popping up. Fix: using your foot, firmly but gently press the pop-up riser on the sprinkler head all the way down and release it so it pops back up. You may get wet doing this. Repeat this 4 or 5 times if necessary to loosen and flush out debris caught between the riser and the cap. If this doesn't work, turn off the water and try pulling up the riser on the sprinkler with your hand. Even with the proper spring resistance, the riser should move easily up and down without hanging up. Problem: sprinkler head broken, bubbling, or gushing water from the top. Fix: replace cracked or broken nozzles. Problem: poor distribution pattern. Fix: check the nozzle for damage or blockage. Replace nozzle with a proper pattern. Increase or decrease the throw distance by turning the screw on the top of the nozzle. Tighten the screw to decrease the throw, or loosen the screw to lengthen the throw. Problem: sprinkler head no longer straight up and down. Fix: realign pipe to an upright perpendicular position. This may require you to loosen the soil around the irrigation head and riser. Pull the irrigation head perpendicular and then tamp the soil back in place. In severe cases, you may also need to reinstall the tee and riser. Problem: sprinkler heads creating a cloud of mist. Fix: this is usually caused by too much pressure. Consider installing a pressure regulator at the meter or valve, or change to pressure regulating heads. Problem: grass, shrub, or tree branches blocking the distribution pattern. Fix: prune overgrown plant material, raise or lower the riser, or move the sprinkler head if necessary. Problem: sprinkler head sunken into the ground and not fully popping up. Fix: install a new riser to raise the sprinkler head to be even with the grade of the soil. Problem: dry landscape areas or poor coverage. Fix: check the pressure of the system. Clean and check nozzles and filters. Adjust the spray throw pattern of the sprinkler nozzle. Avoid irrigating when windy. Maintain a mulch layer on all planted beds. In sloped turf areas, consider the cycle and soak method. Problem: Water bubbling, dripping, or gushing all the time. Fix. Check to make sure the valve is not leaking. Look for signs of water runoff due to excessive run times. Heavy rainfall may also be a contributing factor during these wet periods. Do not irrigate during these times. Problem. Runoff occurs before adequate water is applied. Fix. Use the cycle and soak method. On your irrigation controller, set the station to run for 2 or 3 shorter intervals instead of one longer run cycle. Problem. An area along a road, driveway, or sidewalk stays too dry. Fix. Correct a poor distribution pattern by adjusting the throw of the nozzle, or replace the nozzle with a more correct pattern. Utilize the cycle and soak irrigation method. The best alternative for this area may be to hand water or utilize a soaker hose.
All right,
You know,
Patrick.
it's great timing on that presentation for those people in Dallas or Fort Worth right now. It is pouring outside right now, so system should be turned off.
Awesome. Hey, Patrick, thank you very much for being here with us. We've come to the end of our programming today. Any last words for our audience?
You know, I would just tell, the biggest advice we tell people is to remember that your sprinkler system supplements the lack of rainfall. You want to try to depend on that natural rainfall as much as possible when it is raining. So when you know it's going to rain, when during the winter time, when you don't need to irrigate, try to save that water. That water was intended for us. It wasn't really intended for the outdoors. We have that luxury of the system outdoors, and let's treat it at that as a luxury when we need it.
Thank you, Patrick. Let's do this again sometime. We don't have to wait for
Absolutely.
Fix the Leak Week, So thank you for being here. And finally, we've included a link to our program survey. We're going to have a survey after our event is completed. I want to thank all of our speakers today. Of course, Mr. Patrick Dickinson with Rooted In, Jessica Woods, and the team over at Rooted In, of course. Special thanks to our partners at the City of Fort Worth, City of Dallas, Tarrant County, the City of Round Rock, and of course the Environmental Protection Agency. We've all worked very hard to bring this programming to you. Once again, I'm Ryan Perlman, and on behalf of all of our partners, thank you guys for being here and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.